In the next few hours, the finance minister is going to go to Parliament and he will present the 2020 budget. Why is this budget different from the others? Because that is the election budget. And every election year, the election budget is one that raises a lot of eyebrows. As they've said, historically, we've always overshot our budget deficit significantly in election year. This is a significant test. The last time we did that in the 2016, our economy grounded to a halt. It was significant. We took us years to try and recover, and we approach an election year. Key is what we're going to witness tomorrow. So we're going to first assess 2019, how it's gone, and then look ahead to 2020 in the budget. Now, there are high expectations, as you can imagine, because of what I just said. Ahead of this budget presentation. Now, the 2020 budget statement is expected, among other things, to provide details on the completion and sustainability of government's flagship programs. There's a number of them that we'll go through tonight for you. The statement is also expected to spell out how Ghana, for the first time, would self-finance its presidential and parliamentary elections in 2020. The donors have begun to pull away. They've been supporting us over the years, but they're pulling away in terms of financing our budget. So it's a tough one for this particular government as well. Now, the flagship programs, 16 in all, including free SHS, also one district, one factory, and we'll examine there's one village, one dam, one constituency, $1 million. Planting for food and jobs is another one that we are watching close to see what the budget says about this. The beauty about these various interventions is that the government gave itself timelines. The timeline will expire next year. And so we're going to watch closely to see how the 2020 budget plans to execute, provide funding to execute and complete all these big promises in the 2016 manifesto that found its way into government policies. So it's a big deal. We'll watch that. Now, the minority in Parliament is threatening to give Mr. Ofori-Atta a vote of no confidence. Why? Because they believe he's exceeding his fiscal limits. The minority claims Mr. Ofori-Atta is massaging the MPP administration's spending figures to keep it within the acceptable limit. And you know, there's a law that is regulating spending, so that you stay within, as far as the fiscal deficit is concerned, you do not go beyond 5%. Now, the minority's accusation is that the finance minister, knowing that there's a law that will catch him if he does anything beyond 5% to GDP in terms of the budget deficit, is deliberately massaging the figures, hiding some of them. So you see the figure as less than 5%, but in reality is more. That's the minority's accusation. We'll get into that tonight. Now, the 2019 budget was tagged, as you know, a stronger economy for jobs and prosperity. That is where we'll start the conversation tonight and ask the question, has the 2019 budget delivered on jobs and prosperity? First question we'll ask on the show. Stay with us as we go into that. Now, it is set within the context of Ghana Beyond Aid and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Has he delivered this as well? We'll look at that. Now, it focuses on building a more dynamic and stronger economy. We also know that by accelerating, economic growth, modernizing agriculture, industrialization, key point we'll talk about, industrialization, society, and protecting the vulnerable to increase jobs and prosperity. We'll look at whether they delivered on that. Remember what the 2019 budget did? Introduce several taxes. Controversial one was a number of taxes, including the communication service tax from 6 to 9%. That was increased. There's also onward adjustment of the road fund levy was a key thing in the 2019 budget. The energy debt recovery levy also came into mention. The price stabilization and recovery levy to bring the ratios close to 21% was also a key thing that was mentioned. Oh, the luxury tax was eventually removed. I became a victim of this. I paid my luxury tax. That doesn't say I was driving a luxury car. That was just measured on the cylinders you drive. Even if you drive a 1965 car, if it's 3 cylinders above, it's a luxury vehicle. So don't think I'm driving a luxury vehicle. I paid it, and then a few days later, the budget was read, was scrapped. I've already paid it. So that was 2019, recalling what happened there. So key thing, we have to assess 2019 if we are going to make any sense of 2020. That's what we're going to do tonight. Stay with us because we have the people equipped with the knowledge and the know-how to help us break this down so that we can make sense of what is to come tomorrow on PM Express. Stay with us. In the studio is Professor Eric Osei Asibe. He is Associate Professor, Economic Department of the University of Ghana. Prof, thank you very much for your time here on PM Express. Also with me is Chuma Kwabwa, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Ghana Industries. Grateful that you could join us, Seth. James Kluti-Abeji is a Deputy Minority Leader in Parliament, joins us on the line. He used to be the Chair of the Finance Committee as well. He's also the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. Mr. Kluti-Abeji, I'm grateful that you could join us from your office.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Let me start with you, Seth. I mean, industry is so key for this particular government, and so the 2019 budget, which we are about to usher out and usher in the new budget, there's a lot of talk about investment in the sector, etc. Normally, I know there will be some consultation before the budget is finalized. For a group like yours, it's so important for government, etc. Have you been consulted yet, and what are your key inputs into the 2020 budget?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we've been consulted. You know, the budgetary process goes through a whole long process. And then for AGI, we invite our members to give us inputs, which we make a memo to the ministry. Then we make presentations. So we have been consulted, and we have actually made inputs to the 2020 budget. Key issues, one, we always talk about macroeconomic stability is key. So in our input, we made it clear that we would like to see indicators of the macroeconomic environment, inflation, cedi depreciation, interest rates, and all those macroeconomic indicators being on the right direction so that we have stability and the businesses can plan with it. So that's the first point. We also talked about the benchmark values. You remember in the course of the year, there was the introduction of the reduction in the benchmark values. That had a terrible effect on industries. And I believe and I know that even
benchmark, the port?
The port issues.
Why is that a terrible effect? Because I thought that was supposed to rather help with...
Well, the expectation...
Make it cheaper to import through the port.
Yes, but you see, if you make it cheaper, what is the implication on local manufacturing?
Flooding the markets.
We are flooding the market with imported products and making local companies uncompetitive. So we had issues with it.
A lot of you import a lot of your raw materials, even those who produce locally.
Yeah, but the point is that raw material importers were not paying that much tax. If it's 5%, for example, and you have 50% reduction, the gain there is 2.5%. But if somebody was importing finished products and was paying 20% as duty and reduced it by 50%, means the gain there for him is 10%. That is very significant. So you are putting him ahead of the local manufacturer. So that we had an issue with it. And we were not against the complete introduction of the whole system, but we thought that it should be targeted at products that we don't have local capacity to produce. So if it's vehicles, if it's computers, products that we are not producing locally, you can reduce the benchmark value so that the cost of it to consumers will be okay. But for products you have local capacity, you are making local companies uncompetitive. So that's one issue that we had, and I think we've well articulated it with the Ministry of Finance.
It's been many months since that's happened. What has been the measurable impact on industry?
No, it's not been good because a lot of companies are having to reduce their volumes of production because their market size is shrinking. Imports are coming in large volumes. And we are also aware that even GRA is not probably meeting its revenue target because of some of this, because the revenue that was supposed to be generated from imports is coming down as a result of this. So it's had a negative effect. And we are expecting that in the 2020 budget, there will be a review of that.
Okay.
The other issue we also had was, you know, last year, midterm budget review, there was introduction of the 5% straight levy, which was 2.5% for GET Fund and 2.5% for VAT. It had a negative effect on manufacturing.
How?
Yes, it is the case that, you know, when VAT is an input tax, so when you put VAT on your product, you must claim it back, and it was 17.5%. So you charge a VAT of 17.5%, and then you claim back 17.5%. That was the previous regime. With the introduction of the 5% levy, what it meant was that you actually pay VAT of 17.5 to government on behalf of enterprises or your suppliers, and then you can only claim back 12.5%. So the 5% becomes a tax, a levy on you, and that goes against your profit or your cost. So that additional levy was actually increasing the costs for manufacturers. And interestingly, it wasn't even affecting the entire service sectors or the entire sectors of the economy. It was really on the manufacturing. So we had an issue with it, and we are expecting that in this budget, 2020 budget, it will be reviewed as well.
Interesting. Hold on for me. I'll come to you, Prof, shortly, because you are the neutral, I guess, brain in here. You give me your own verdict on things as well. But James Kuchia, let me come to you. Give me your verdict on how the 2019 budget, has been implemented, and its impact on the economy so far.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, if you look at budget is structured where we have the segment that's talk about revenue, and then we have the expenditure segment, and then you have the balancing section. So I'll talk about the revenue section, and I want to agree entirely with the AGI person that the measures taken by government actually affected the revenue generation by government. If you talk about the benchmark values, first of all, it affects the local industry, and for that matter, government loses a lot of revenue from increased production. Once the economy is in flux with imported goods because of the cheap import duties, definitely the local businesses are going to suffer, and for that matter, they will not make much profit for which government can tax. So that is one of the factors contributing to the low revenue collection by government. Now, you can also ask whether this reduction in import value is actually reflecting in the prices of the imported goods. So if it is not reflecting, then it means that virtually government is only making money in the pocket of these importers because they are not also reflecting the prices by reducing the prices of the imported goods. So these are some of the reasons why revenue did not work well. Now, we also talk about government talking about working on the exemption policy, and then as at the time that government presented 2019 budget in November 2018, the minister said that the draft policy had been completed and it was ready to be forwarded to Parliament for approval. As we speak now, 1 year down the line, that draft policy hasn't come to Parliament. So if you talk about that is part of revenue that also must come to government, but it is also not coming because as we going for loans and then projects are being executed, we exempt those taxes that the contractor have to pay to government. So that also affects the revenue. So in a nutshell, the revenue portion is not performing as expected. So that is it. Now, when it comes to the expenditure portion, the expenditure portion is also itemized into three, where we have the emolument portion, where we call it personal emolument, which is the cost that government pay to employees of government or personnel-related costs. That take the chunk of the government revenue. Now, we also talk about the goods and services for the running of the state's machinery. That covers all kind of items that are used in offices. And then the third one is the capital expenditure. If you look at the critically, you realize that the item 1, which is the personal emolument portion, is increasing, and for that matter, is affecting what must go to both item 2, which is goods and services, and then that goes to item 3, which is the capital investment. So little have been done in terms of capital investment because if you don't have much available after paying salaries, definitely you cannot do much. Then also
in the 2019 budget, one of the key things that in the budget was to show that we're spending less. In fact, spending on capital expenditure had significantly gone down, but government says they're going to
Yes.
rectify it in the 2020 budget because they got all these monies that they're going to throw in.
Yeah, it is because we don't have enough resources available after paying the item 1, which is the personal emolument. So once we don't have much available, definitely investment in capital expenditure will go down. I wonder how they're going to rectify that one in 2020. Because if they don't work on the revenue side in order to increase revenue collection, definitely the story will be the same. And I believe that because next year budget is going to be election year budget, definitely government will want to put some measures in place to give some hope to Ghanaians. But I can tell you that it's going to be difficult for government next year.
Yeah,
So
hold on for me there briefly. I want to bring that to Prof. So that's a very important point. We're going into an election year. Consistently, one of the biggest challenges our budget in the last 3 years have faced is revenue shortfalls. IMF has consistently flagged this big problem for us. Yet we know what happens in election year. Government will have to spend. So we are expecting a lot in infrastructure. Capital investment is going to go up definitely. The president has told us that they're going to put billions into the room. So, but how is government going to balance the shortfalls in revenue but the expectations of more spending in the election year? That's going to be a big problem.
Definitely. It's really a big problem for government because this election year cycle, the political business cycle, really has been a perennial concern for this country for many years. If you look at all our 7 elections, with the exception of 2004,
yeah.
Where we did not record high budget deficit. All of that, we have had some slippages. And of course, it's mostly come from 2 angles: shortfalls in revenue and government over expenditure, of budget expenditures and all of that. But for me, this particular budget is quite unique. It is quite extraordinary because if you look at one, it is a post-IMF budget, and IMF and the world is actually watching how well government will be able to consolidate the fiscal gains that the IMF program brought about. And 2, as you rightly said, it's an election year, and therefore for all the election years, if it's the spirit is anything to go by, then it brings its own peculiarities, right? And then 3, we know that it's also the last budget for the president. If you look at the coordinated program for social and economic policy, it's the president has to give an account. It's a, taking stock of what the president has done. And most importantly, is a budget that is really going to be presented in a very tighter regulatory framework and environment, because this is the budget that is going to be informed by our PFM, Public Financial Management Act, where the regulation just recently came out, 2019, which actually gives it a leg to operate, the regulation for the PMF Act 2016. It is also a budget that is actually based...
What is the PFM? What is
the Public Financial Management Act.
What is the central legislation that people will be of importance to the budget?
Yeah, it's about fiscal discipline.
Is it the one that sets the 5% limit?
No, that's the Fiscal Responsibility Act. That's what I was going to come to.
Okay.
So that is another one which was just passed December 2018, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, for the first time in the history of this country, where we have the fiscal responsibility, actually making sure that a budget is prepared within certain stricter framework, which actually peg the deficit at 5%. So you really don't have enough room to operate with that kind of tightness. And also, of course, we have a fiscal council and we have a fiscal financial stability councils, all of them in place. And so really it provides some kind of uniqueness, and it's going to be very interesting how, this budget will really be able to deliver and make sure that it stays within the fiscal band that has been provided and regulatory framework. And
I want you to, I want us to explore that a bit more.
Yeah.
Because what you said is really true, that that is going to be the key thing. The minority had a very interesting press conference a few days ago on what you've just said. James Abaji, please explain this for me. Your fundamental position, just on the back of what Prof has said, that primarily because of all these rules that have come into effect, you allege that the finance minister, knowing these, is somehow hiding figures and doing some real financial engineering so that the real deficit doesn't show on the books to take him beyond the 5% limit. And so that when he comes to you tomorrow, he will report that the 2019-2020 is going to be within the limit, but in reality, he is not. Explain to me why you say that.
Yeah, it is true because the law says that the Fiscal Responsibility Act says that the budget deficit should not exceed 5%. And this law was sponsored by the finance minister. And knowing very well that this is the situation, he cannot spend and report that his expenditure led to deficits of over 5%, because definitely will be breaking the law and he will suffer for it. Now, we have a system that records expenditure that we undertake in this country in terms of the public financial management, which is a GIFMIS, which is an integrated system that record revenue and as well as record expenditure. But because the system is not fully integrated, there is an avenue for you to pay and payment outside the GIFMIS. And this is where we have an issue, because the minister knowing very well that if I do all payments, especially the huge payments, and I'll mention one particular one, if I do all these payments through the platform, the GIFMIS platform, definitely it's going to result into a deficit which will be above the 5%. And for that matter, he chose those payments to make them outside the platform. And one of those payments is payment that he made to the independent power producers. You know, the independent power producers produces power and this power is bought by government, and government must pay. And therefore, it is part of government expenditure. Now, government, through the ESLA, the Energy Sector levy the consumers of this power, and then these consumers pay the money to government. And government record this. This record must also go to the GIFMIS platform to also ensure that revenue is recorded. And then, so the payment that are made to the IPPs must also go to the GIFMIS platform, and then that is also recorded. But the minister is making payment to the IPPs using it as off-budget item or below-the-line item, which will not go through the normal process through the GIFMIS system. Recently, he made a payment of total of 3 billion Ghana cedis to a number of IPPs, that is independent power producers. And this was not made through the GIFMIS system. That is what we are talking about. So we have the evidence to show that if that 3 billion has been passed through the GIFMIS system, the report that is given now, which makes sure that the deficit is below 5%, would have been more, it will be more than the 5%. So that is why we are coming up with that. So we asked him to correct that in the 2020 budget.
Yes, Prof, does the systems and the structures that the economy currently operates on, can it even allow a finance minister to play around this the way the minority suggests?
Well, I don't know what they know, but I don't think so, because it depends. It's all about the classification. And I know that this classification really has been agreed upon with the IMF. I mean, it's way back. I think it's even precedes this government, how expenditure, some of this expenditure, I think, will be treated within the budget framework. I think what the minority is talking about is more or less treated as amortization, as loan being paid to the IPPs, and therefore it will not necessarily show up as an expenditure in that regard. So which means that it will not be captured. If that is the agreement, then I really don't see the point, because it's a classification, unless that classification or the finance minister is changing that basic classification for how such finance, because these are huge funds, and I don't think really the IMF will allow such payment to be done outside the budget system.
But we are no longer, you know.
Well, but this is not the first time we are paying the IPPs.
Okay.
The IPPs have been there ever since we started inviting them, when we started having the difficulties in our energy sector, and therefore this payment have been going on. So I wonder how it was treated in the previous regime, whether it was different from what's being treated now. But I really don't think it's a bigger issue, in that IMF would definitely have pointed it out if it is. Okay. If there's a disagreement with that kind of treatment.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So, so like I was saying, the expenditure side, or the whole budget system this year, really is going to be interesting, and it's really going to test our resolve to ensure that there's no reversibility. We are not really going back to the days where we have that kind of fiscal slippage, and it will really be coming down to unwavering political commitment. Anything short of that is really going to be difficult, particularly given the tightness within the budget, given the fact that, as the Honorable was talking about, given the fact that we're paying close to about 40% of our revenue, domestic revenue, on compensation, and about 35% on servicing debt, and about 25, more than a quarter, just statutory, which almost leaves nothing for us to spend on capital expenditure. So really, it would take very huge, unwavering commitment on the part of government. But of course, it is a government that has rolled out all this institutional framework to ensure that we do the right thing. And for me, it's quite refreshing that once you have these institutions, guiding you, serving as watchdog, when you deviate, there's sanctions that await you, that you have to face the consequences. So it's no longer the years where you can just spend anyhow and get away with it, and come back after elections and begin to, change course and begin to do things right. Now, you have to make sure that you do things right even before the elections. Otherwise, you'll be exposed. Okay, so, yeah.
I want to bring Mr. Koba. I want to come to some of the bread and butter issues. The 2019 budget was on the theme a stronger economy for jobs and prosperity. There's no other better place to measure jobs than industry. Tell me, in 2019, have you seen growth for industry enough for you guys to provide more jobs?
I wouldn't say there has been that significant growth. I don't think the structure of the economy has changed significantly as far as the various contributions from the different sectors are concerned. I think that if you look at the agriculture contribution to GDP over the years, it's been dwindling. Industry may have gone up a bit because of mining and oil and gas, but manufacturing hasn't done well over the years, for so many years. And
it didn't change in 2019.
I don't think that it has changed that significantly in 2019. I know that there have been a lot of initiatives under the One District, One Factory, the stimulus package. So there are some projects coming up, but it will take a while before you have the effect. So 2019, I have not seen that significant changes. As a matter of fact, we have also received some complaints from companies in terms of the purchasing power of the people. I think the banking reforms and all that are all having a bit of effect. So I wouldn't say that that's significant jump in terms of manufacturing output. We are yet to look at the figures, but in actual fact, manufacturing contribution to GDP, as far as 2019 is concerned, I'm not expecting to see that significant jump, which is changing the structure of the economy.
Have we stagnated? Have we retrogressed, or have we progressed?
I wouldn't say we have retrogressed. It is more of a stability that we are experiencing. If you look at the trend, I think that there isn't much changes in terms of manufacturing output. And talking to the individual companies, I'm not aware that the individual companies are making that much, significant volumes in sales, which would translate into higher, total output. There haven't also been that many industries established. We are aware that the initiatives are helping gradually. A few industries are coming up, but we knew that right from the onset that if you say one district, one factory, overnight you wouldn't have so many factories spread across the country.
But you've had 3 years.
Well, but I think, we have to understand one thing, that most of the one district, one factory agenda is more related to agro-processing. Agro-processing, for you to set up an agro-processing factory, you must have the feeding industry. So it means that agriculture must work, must produce to volumes must consistently and reliably supply materials to the factory. So even when you want to grow the crops, some of them could be cash crops, which will take several years to mature. Even the very first one, it takes some months to a year before it matures. And no industry will be put up when it's not sure of the source of raw materials. And therefore, to expect that within 2-3 years, you have factories all over the country, was actually a wrong expectation. So we were not expecting that it would change overnight. But I think the initiative is good. And I think that as we put in the effort, and even if it comes slowly, eventually we'll get to a point where we'll have a number of factories. That's why I'm saying that for 2019, I wouldn't say there has been that significant growth in the numbers of factories that was expected to be set up. We don't have it, and therefore the structure wouldn't change much. But the stability is good. Let's see how it progresses in the coming years.
So, based on what has been done and the foundation you've seen, etc., 2020, the projection it was 7% growth for industry. When the government has this plan up onto 2030, I think, and they put the 27% growth in industry. Is this a realistic growth projection?
Well, I think it depends on what could be done between now and the 2020 and up to the end of the 2020.
Well, thankfully, tomorrow morning we'll hear what they are planning to do.
Exactly. So
but
for example,
are you hopeful?
We are hopeful that there will be growth, but we are not sure that there will be significant change in the structure of the Ghanaian economy to the extent that you have that volumes of manufacturing plants established and volumes of output coming out of manufacturing. Because the environment is still tough for manufacturing. A lot of the issues, electricity cost is still very high. Accessing finance, getting access to medium to long-term capital is still difficult. We are operating with the same banks. There haven't been any significant changes in the banking system. Interest rate is still high, even though policy rate has dropped significantly. We've seen some drop though, I must admit there has been some drop, but it's not significant enough. So the factors that will determine or will push a big transformation has to be in place. And I don't think we have those factors in place that will transform manufacturing overnight. And therefore, to expect that in 2020 there will be that significant change will be a challenge. In 2019, there was some budget provision made for supporting the One District, One Factory initiative, the stimulus package, and all the industry-related activities. I think that if we're able to push more on that and ensure that indeed the industries get access to these funds and encourage them to set up the factories in the districts, then we will see some significant changes. As it is now, I don't think that we have pushed that much in these areas.
Prof, that's an important point. This is AGI's position. They don't sound, I don't hear, a bit of excitement about 2019 and going to 2020. That must sound worrying. This is a flagship area for the government, right? What's your own reading into this?
Well, I think, of course, 2019 has been a very difficult year for manufacturing sector, particularly given what has happened in the banking space. There have been some credit squeeze. Banks are quite unwilling to advance credit to businesses and others. So they are really under very difficult conditions. But of course, we've also had some improvement within the business enabling environment. Where the regulatory framework has been streamlined. As doing business indicators, of course, now we have worsened the rate, the level, the ranking has worsened quite a bit, but it's much better than it used to be. Credit appears to be coming down. That is, interest rates, inflation is quite low, which is giving people more purchasing power to buy goods and services. And so I think that, and also government-owned deliberate policy to promote industrialization. They talk about of the industrial parks. I don't know the extent to which they have gone, but I think there's something in place that they're working around. The One District, One Factory, and then the stimulus package, and then the Exim Bank, which is supporting quite a number of industries. And so, by and large, I think that on a net basis, I think there has been some improvement in the manufacturing sector. You've seen now, if you're going to buy, many people have stopped importing even ceramics and tiles and others, because we are now producing quite a good number here in Ghana. That is an addition with all the food processing and the toilet rolls and others that are being produced, for me, is a positive addition to the manufacturing sector. The industrial sector, the 7% that you spoke about, I think is more, it depends. It's really going to be driven by the extractive sector, largely. The oil and gas, the new discoveries, and then the coming on board of some wells that they have drilled is going to underpin that industrial sector. The mining activity that has, with the removal of the ban on the small-scale mining, it's also going to be a key driver for that. And also with the construction activities that are going to pick up. You know, this year construction has not really done so well, particularly government inability.
For the last 3 years.
Yeah, government inability to spend on roads and other infrastructure. But it looks quite positive going forward in the fourth quarter of the year, and then the 2020, particularly as the announcement had come that the Sino-Hydro funds is actually going to come in, and government readiness to also pay arrears to contractors and others. So the construction sector is going to pick up, the oil and gas is going to pick up, the mining sector is really picking up, given the commodity price now, which is quite favorable. And so that for me is going to underpin the industrial sector. If all the one factory, one district, one factory, at least if 50% or even 30% of it are able to come on board, I'm sure the manufacturing sector is going to do well, because last year it has, I think, it recorded around 3.5% or thereabout. That's the manufacturing sector. It has been in the negative for some years ago, but from last year we started seeing some positive growth. So if these things come on board, then we're going to see much bigger momentum within the manufacturing subsector of the economy. With the talk about of the refinery and then the hydrocarbon industry and then the bauxite industry coming on board, I really am very much positive with regard to the manufacturing sector.
James Abeji, you wanted something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, you know, as I said, it depends on where we push the agenda quite strongly. Manufacturing definitely has good potential, and if we put in a lot more effort, we can actually generate the volumes. He mentioned the bauxite sector. I think it's one of the areas that could be a game changer, and you could appreciate the effort that has been made so far. All the structures seem to have been laid on the ground, and we've managed to get this Sino-Hydro facility, which can help, you know. So if we really push that agenda, we can do well. It all depends on how we strategically position ourselves. And then I also mentioned the Continental Free Trade Agreement that is also coming to force from July next year. It opens, you know, a big opportunity for us in terms of market opportunity. Of course, there's also a threat, because we're also opening a market for other products that will come in. So it all depends on how you strategize. And if we really have to strategize well and make sure that we show up industry, we need to improve the scale of production and then deal with some of the environmental issues concerning the business environment to reduce cost of production. And in that case, we can go very far with it.
James Abeji, are you that optimistic about 2020?
No, I'm not.
Why?
I'm not. I'm not because if you look at the projections that we have in the medium term, and then you also look at how the performance have been over the 3 years from 2017 to current 2019. I do not expect that all of a sudden within a year everything should change to that level. Yes, government is making all the efforts. As we saying that 2020 budget is going to be an election year budget. Government, all the failed projects that have not been able to be executed in 2019, if it is sector by sector, those projects are definitely going to be repeated in 2020 budgets because there was no resources for those projects to take off. If we repeat them in 2020 budget and the resources are not there, still they will also not be undertaken. My only caution, which I think that is what government will be doing, is to go and borrow and overborrow. So, because if the domestic revenue is not sufficient enough to take care of the compensation amount figure, and also take care of the servicing of debts, as well as the rest. For the capital expenditure, government want to go and borrow in order to do that, because the 2020 budget, government definitely want to give some kind of hope to Ghanaians, because definitely if you don't give hope, Ghanaians will not vote for you. So they want to give hope to Ghanaians so that they can get a vote from Ghanaians. But definitely, if government do that, and then government want to fulfill those figures or whatever hope that they are giving to Ghanaians in the budget, then they have to borrow. They cannot overborrow, because already, look at what we have. Because of the rebasing of our GDP, government thinks that there is enough space to borrow. So government is borrowing, and as we speak now, our total GDP is hitting 200 million Ghana cedis. So that is something that is threatening, that if government continue to borrow and overborrow, then our economy is under threat. So I do not think that there's hope for us, which can all of a sudden in 2020, the way we are going, there is going to be hope that will change the whole situation. I don't think so.
Well, I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, I'm going to wrap up and get a sense from my panelists. What are the big things government would they expect to be included in the budget to turn around the fortunes of some of these key sectors of the economy? So one, we avoid a situation where we go back into eroding the gains we've made because of an election year. Their own suggestions about their own expectations in some of these key sectors to get the economy post-IMF fully functional on its feet and increasing growth as well. As we speak, Ghana is one of the fastest growing economy. It used to be the fastest growing economy a few months back. That has been reassessed because the other countries doing quite well as well. But we are one of the fastest growing. How do we maintain that? We've been there before, remember, 2010, 11, was it? We had 14% growth from 2011. We're the fastest growing economy. Shortly after that, we went into a significant tailspin. We nearly hit recession, and we struggled to recover. It almost appears that we are at the point again where we have reached our peak. How do we avoid that pitfall? Have we learned our lessons? And what should the finance minister be doing tomorrow in the budget to keep us afloat until, I guess, we're able to take off fully? Stay with us. So live on PM Express. Let's wrap up now. Let me come back to you again on this. You've told us at the beginning your proposals to government. There was one big one, which was the benchmark values that you want government to review. When you say review, though, what did you mean? Should they scrap it? Should they return it to what it used to be before they announced the reductions? Or simply bring the values back up? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, we have always said that government should have done a bit of targeting. You can't have benchmark value reduction for all products. Every product that's imported into the country and you use the benchmark value for it wasn't the best of policy. There are products that we have local capacity to produce. For those ones, you need to protect your local industries. So don't reduce the benchmark values on those ones. For those that we don't have local capacity, you can maintain it. Because, I mean, you can maintain the reduction. It means that you get more revenue from it. Because as been indicated, government has suffered a bit from the revenue side of things. But I think they suffered more on the products that we are importing so much volumes without local production at all. So for those ones, government should look at it. But the one we have local capacity, let's be selective. Let's do the list, and ADR can help in this. We are actually discussing this. So we do a list of products that we have local capacity. For those ones, don't reduce the benchmark, rather protect local industries. So we expect this to happen in the 2020 budget.
Okay, you're confident. What's your confidence level?
Well, I'm quite confident.
Knowing the conversations you've had.
Well, I'm very confident that government is going to review it, because it is in the interest of government, it's in the interest of industry. And you know, government has always said that industry is the focus of its development agenda. True. That's why we have all these initiatives. Yeah. So on one hand, you cannot have an agenda which is promoting industry, and then have policies that are running counter to the promotion of industry. It doesn't gel. So I expect that there should be a review of this. I think that it is so critical. And several other, of course, other issues could also be looked at to support industries.
Okay, top, just run the bullet for me. Other ones you expect?
Okay, beside the benchmark values, we also expect some tax, the tax regime to be changed a little bit. I talked about a 5% straight VAT. It's inimical to industry. Let's look at it. Again, let's use government procurement to support local industries. Lastly, you know, I talked about the Continental Free Trade Agreement. It is so critical for us now. We have no choice because otherwise our market is going to be flooded with goods from other African countries. So we need to be very strategic. And being strategic means that we must select certain products that we know that for this product we have the comparative and then competitive advantage to produce them, and give the necessary support to industries that are producing them in large volumes. We need to produce to scale, because that's the only way you can reduce cost per unit and become competitive. So we have to be very strategic. We also need to look at the agricultural value chain. Pick some critical products that can supply, that can be produced in large scale, give the necessary support, produce in volumes so that they can be reliably supplied to the industrial sector. The linkage between agric and industry is key if you are talking one industry, one factory. And I want to see a clear budget provision for pushing that agenda. And all things being equal, if we're able to do this, I'm sure we'll see improvement in industrial
Prof,
sector.
your suggestion for tomorrow?
Well, my suggestion for tomorrow is to see a clear commitment to fiscal discipline, that the finance minister, no matter the pressures that it's coming on expenditure, should always endeavor to match expenditure with revenue. I also want to see much more innovation in the revenue collection efforts on the part of government, particularly at the sub-national level, local governance level. How do we effectively collect local taxes, particularly from property tax, which presents huge potential for government, for revenue generation. So I want to see more innovation in that regard. And then I also want to see policies that tend to help create an environment that will lead to the lending rates coming down, to help the private sector to be competitive, because really we've seen some marked improvement in the macroeconomic sector. Inflation is around 7.6.
But the Bank of Ghana has reduced the rates.
The Bank of Ghana is around 16%.
That hasn't reflected in
but the lending rate really has been very
Some have
sluggish.
suggested that the legislation should be introduced to
that is definitely that's not the answer. I mean, we can't introduce legislation. We can't go back to regulatory.
If you leave it to the market, as they've shown us, although the Bank of Ghana
that we are within a free enterprise system, and therefore we have to allow the interplay of demand and supply to determine the rates. And so it comes down to government borrowing at the high end of the market, and then also the central bank also closing the gap between inflation rate and then monetary policy rate. I think it has widened so much that when it was 10% was 16, it come to 7.6, it's still at 16. And therefore there's the need to close that gap, and also for the treasury bill rate to also begin to come down. These are the necessary ingredients for the lending rates to come down.
The treasury bill rate, that's the only safe investment for people like us, so don't touch it.
No, it has to.
It has
to. The banks themselves
we don't want to take our money to fund managers, etc. We just want the treasury bill. That one is safe for us.
The economy doesn't benefit from all this macroeconomic achievement, because the only connection between the macro and then the real sector is through interest rate, where the enterprises and industries can borrow to expand their industry and employ more people, for people to begin to enjoy higher incomes.
James Aveji, tell me what will be your own contribution if you are asked for the 2020 budget for Ghana for the economy to thrive in 2020?
Well, the president promised Ghanaians of changing our system from taxation to production. But that has not been demonstrated enough, where we think that the government is going to rely on production for its revenue. So I want to see in the budget, 2020 budget, more commitment on the part of government to ensure that they will shift from taxation to production. In that base, we do not expect that there should be introduction of new taxes. And then we also don't want government to extend the duration of existing taxes that are supposed to end in December 2019. So that is what I'm expecting. Then I'm also expecting measures to be put in place to ensure that procurement methods are followed to ensure that public servants, civil servants, or government employees do not exploit the procurement system to go into procurement of items or that will bring more cost to government. Because by my work as the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, it has been coming clear and more clearer that most of the workers or civil servants try to work on the procurement system in order to spend money that they are not supposed to actually spend.
James Abaji, I'm grateful that you joined us. He's a Deputy Minority Leader in Parliament. Seth Chuma Kwabwa is Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Ghana Industries, and Professor Eric Asibe is also Professor, Economics Department of the University of Ghana. Just a few hours away to that crucial budget. We're back here tomorrow evening analyzing what the Finance Minister had said. As of tonight, difficult to get any person in government to speak to it because everybody's locked up in a room trying to finalize what is going to be read tomorrow. There's stories about how minutes into a budget presentation, things are changing in that document. And so expect that it's a big deal for a government going into an election. Big day tomorrow. Join us again as we begin to dissect it. Same time. Enjoy it.
PM Express was brought to you by
Emirates. Fly better.